and this panel discussion with Father Ian Van Heusen, Matt Rosen, and Darren Chiu is moderated by Karl Kilb. And just as Web 1.0 changed the world during the mid to late 1990s, many believe the newest evolution, Web 3.0, will cause dramatic changes in how we interact with each other, with business, and with social institutions. So here to lead that discussion is Karl Kilb. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are we leaving? We going out?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'll wait for each of the three panelists to come out. Thanks, gentlemen. So hi, good afternoon, everyone. I've been fortunate to have a chance to meet a lot of you over the last 2 days, but if you haven't already met me, I'm happy to catch up with you through today, and of course, at any time, you can reach out to me. My name's Karl Kilb. I'm the co-founder of Crescente Innovation Corporation. We're based in New York City. My partner, Eddie Cullen, is also here. We are using all kinds of new technologies and methodologies for the betterment of society, and in particular, leveraging elements of Web 3.0, which is why I'm so excited to be here with this panel today. So I'm just going to give a brief introduction of each of our distinguished panelists and then encourage you to go to the conference website for more information. So first, immediately to my left is Father Ian Van Heusen. Father's a diocesan priest in Greenville, North Carolina. His primary ministry, working as a campus minister at East Carolina University. He started the Art of Living Well apostolate to create content to help people live as authentic disciples by drawing on the spiritual masters such as St. John of the Cross and St. Thomas Aquinas. In 2022, earlier this year, he established Meta Catholic to adapt content creation for the emerging fields of virtual reality, augmented reality, and the Web 3.0 metaverse. Matt Rosen, right to the left of Father, began learning computer programming at the age of 10 in an effort to create his own video games. Little did he know what that would blossom into. Today, he's the co-founder and chief product officer at his company, Splinterlands, which is one of the largest and most successful Web3 tech-powered gaming companies around. And then on the far left is Darren Chiu. Darren graduated from the University of Southern California. He's got a degree in industrial engineering. He then spent 5 years as a consultant and advisor for Ernst & Young in Chicago. Then he decided to leave the security of corporate America to join startups in the crypto space, ultimately focusing on the area of the internet and data privacy. So you have the right hat on today, Darren, definitely. Most recently, he served as the lead of education at the Secret Network, which was the first blockchain with customizable privacy with a particular focus on Web 3. So for those of you who were here early yesterday, and we were very honored at Crescente to sponsor the speaker from Oxford, Father Andrew Pinsent. In a lot of ways, I think Father Ian is like a modern version of so many of the priests that we saw in that report yesterday from Father in Oxford. Because often in life, you wonder, Father, if, not the stereotype, but you wonder if members of the clergy are up on current technology, and in many ways you're actually way ahead. So I do feel like you were a lot like the priests that we saw in that report yesterday. Can you tell everyone what you're already doing and how you see Web3 and the Catholic Church working well together?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for those kind words. You know, so right now, if you have an Oculus headset, you can go on YouTube VR or Oculus TV and see Meta Catholic content. It's virtual reality content. It's mostly what I would call 360 videos. So you can see that content. That's the main place where we're posting virtual reality content right now. If you go on social media, you can see our two-dimensional content. Basically, the gist of it is if you can build it in a video game engine, you can turn it into virtual reality, and you can turn it into 2D animation. We've been at it for a few months. There's also a 2D version of our virtual rosary. We have a virtual rosary that's getting about 100 views a month on Oculus TV. It's a modest but a good start. And yeah, so we have a lot of content that you can see right now. We had our demo showing what we have. We have 20 headsets where we're doing in-person events. And so, you know, I would say one thing is Web 3.0 is not in the future. It's already here. It's just hasn't been diffused throughout the population. Web 3.0 is already here for the most part.
Sure, sure. So maybe when Father Andrew Pinsent does an updated version in about 10 years, we're going to see you on there as the most recent person, way ahead of his time. So I'll jump to Matt. And Matt, as I'm the father of 3, and I can imagine if my sons thought when they were 10 or 12 that they could build out video games and make a career of it, they would have definitely have loved that career path. How do you see, maybe first tell us about your company, and also how you see the Catholic Church potentially benefiting from not only Web 3.0, but also maybe the use of video games?
Yeah, so Splinterlands is a blockchain-based trading card game. So it's similar to games like Magic the Gathering, Pokemon, physical card games that I played when I was younger. One of the things that stuck with me that led to the creation of Splinterlands was when I played those games, I owned cards. You buy cards. They're collectible items like baseball cards or stamps or anything else you might collect. And even though I don't play the games anymore, I have these collectibles that have become quite valuable over the years. And I also played digital video games online, as many people do. But there I didn't own anything. So that entire part of the experience was lost. And I realized that that's really behind everything in Web 2. The users no longer have ownership of anything. Corporations instead do. And I think that's part of what leads the growing wealth divide, the lack of ownership. It's like the American dream. And gaming is only one small piece of that, but that's the piece that I personally am interested in. So once I realized that blockchain, cryptocurrency could be used to both make digital games and allow people to own their assets, just like I used to own physical assets. And that was a kind of an awakening of sorts for me, and I went ahead and built Splinterlands to work like that. And as far as how the Catholic Church or really any other similar type of organization can benefit, this is something we were talking about earlier. I think there's a lot of opportunity to use these type of collectibles as a way to acknowledge support or volunteer work or donations or anything like that, and sort of make that stuff even a little more fun and exciting. Like, oh, if you do a little more, if you help out a little more, you can earn these collectibles, you can complete your collections, you can trade them with other people who've also supported the cause in different ways. And it just, you also mentioned children. That's I think a big thing is, how to get children more involved in these type of things. And, the more you can make it fun, and collecting and trading things is always, for as long as history probably is something that people have done. And I think Web3 is basically the way to do that without having a particular company or government whose interests may or may not be aligned with your organization's controlling it.
And it's funny to me because I collected baseball cards as a kid growing up in New York City and still have them. They take up an incredible amount of space, and trying to keep them in good condition is certainly not easy. So in the digital world, at least they'll always be in mint condition.
Always.
So you talked about ownership and how crucial ownership is, and that's a great segue to you, Darren. Privacy, and you wear it well, is definitely a key element of Web3. Talk about that. Maybe build on what we started to hear from Matt, the idea that in the Web 2 world, we've seen the Googles, the Facebooks, the Twitters, the Amazons, owning all of our personal data, and us really losing control over our identity, allowing people to monetize our identity and our personal data. How will it be different in Web 3?
Yeah, so first of all, super happy to be here. I feel like being part of the Catholic community here, I was able to get a lot of perspectives that were maybe a little bit different than mine, but also at the same time, I got to see everybody coming together to try and build the future of the internet and be a contributor, and also when we're starting from scratch, we get to build something for everybody, right? So that's what I stand for first and foremost. Wearing this hat around is kind of funny because I was walking around and people were looking and they were like, "Ooh, privacy hat. Maybe he doesn't want me to talk to him." He went. So I definitely got some looks. Some people noticed, and people who were actually thinking about data privacy, they came up and talked to me about how they really feel that data privacy is important to them, whether or not it be their financial data privacy or their own personal data that oftentimes gets manipulated by big tech in this data-driven economy, right? And so I wanted to come up in here and tell you a little bit about privacy. When people think about privacy, they sometimes think, oh, what does he have to hide, right? Why is he being so private? But it's not really about that. Data privacy is about being able to choose what you represent to online, right? Some things are more sensitive information, either your personal communications, or it could be something as sensitive as documents across all different industries, health, legal. Certain information, it's important to protect it and to be able to also have the ability to share it with people who should have access to this information, right? Privacy gives you power. You get the access control of being able to share it with the people you believe you can trust. And at the same time, you have the privacy to determine it yourself what you believe you should be able to expose to other people. So here, that's what I really value, data privacy in the Web3 space. Here as part of Secret Network, as well as from Alter Network, both teams that are very fundamentally strong in this space and putting data privacy first, because we, for the very first time, get the opportunity to rebuild the internet in a way that is data private by default.
And so many of the things we talk about, we say rebuild the internet. Do you think in a way we're kind of getting back to what was the original premise of the internet? Maybe it just went a little awry with centralized control and a handful of players, and now there's this realization of how important our personal identities and data are, and we have a chance to kind of rethink it. And I wonder, I'll just start with you, Darren, on this one. You have the perspective of having advised traditional companies like EY, big accounting firms, and then leaving there to go into the crypto world. So how do you see even the big players, the big accounting firms, and even the big data aggregators reacting to what we'll see in Web3?
Yeah, so I think everybody is looking at Web3 with curiosity and also with an intention that innovation often leads to future. And people at EY, they definitely take that very seriously. They have blockchain groups. I wasn't part of that team when I was back at EY. I was part of the tech transformation team on how to help clients of large firms implement new software technologies and to allow them to be either more efficient or also to stay in touch with innovation. So in that regards, I feel like the direction that Web3 is taking, we want to be able to also allow for enterprise use cases, something that hasn't been necessarily as explored as deeply, because sometimes the tool set isn't quite there yet. People are still trying to figure out how DeFi could be used, how blockchain could be used, and as the industry matures, that's when we'll have more institutional grade technologies that will be able to support the use cases of today. Because I think in the future for Web3, it's going to look very similar to the experience here in Web2, but the infrastructure and the incentives underneath at the base layer are going to be making what makes these business models work better.
And Matt, how do you see your company continuing to evolve in the Web3 world?
Well, ultimately, to me, the difference between Web 2 and Web 3 is kind of where the value goes. So in Web 2, the whole difference between Web 1 and Web 2. Web 1 was people publish stuff online. Web 2 were there were places where users could create and publish content, right? So users really provide all of the value from Web 2. Facebook would not be worth very much if no one used it, and same with every other website or application. But all the value that all these people around the world provide, they spend their time and their effort, and they provide all this value. It all goes to companies, and companies that can, like, legally usually only be invested in by people who are already rich, venture capitalists. They invest in those companies. So everyone in the world kind of provides all this value to venture capital investors and company CEOs. And again, not really a surprise that there has been such a growing wealth gap. And the difference then with Web3 is again, comes back to ownership. So when the users are able to also be owners of assets or tokens, NFTs, whatever it is, then the users themselves benefit when the platforms do well. They are almost like they are owners of the company, not legally, because that wouldn't be allowed. But that's how it works. Just like when I still trade Magic the Gathering cards, and I use that as an example. There's card shops all over the country, all over the world, where I can buy old cards from other people. None of that money I'm spending goes to the company that made the cards. That's me putting money into the ecosystem, and it goes to other people who have collected the cards over the years and kept them in mint condition.
Sure, it's all the secondary market.
Exactly, and that was completely and totally lost digitally in Web 2. And so that's where Web 3 is going to help the everyday user, because they actually can gain value themselves from the value that they provide to all these services.
And that gaining of value, Father, go ahead.
I wanted to jump in a little bit. I think one of the things that I've been picking up on this conference, especially this conversation, I think it's great. A lot of it's the back-end stuff, right? So we're talking the blockchain technology. We're talking the things that are going to make possible digital experiences and digital environments and digital things, if you will. But then there's the front-end experience, which is not given enough time and attention. Because, for example, why am I going to need to authenticate that something is real on the internet? The reality is right now, within a few years, deep fakes are already possible, and they will become exponentially better. We, on a modest budget, will probably be able to do something closer to a deep fake in maybe 2 to 3 or 5 years. It's coming pretty quickly. And we were talking about, we've already been brainstorming the idea of doing digital virtual productions where I'm not present. They use AI voiceover, that's my voice, and they do a virtual production with me, and then there's also the element of these digital things. So this authentication, this technology is not just some abstract thing, it's going to be concretely needed with fake news and with those things. And that's one piece of the puzzle, but then there's also going to be things like, you look at Fortnite. How many of you have a kid who plays Fortnite? Fortnite, yeah. So with Fortnite, you buy skins, right? That's a digital asset. The difference is, in the technology, the company owns the skin. But what these guys are talking about is that these digital assets, you'll be able to own it yourself. So when you buy a skin for Fortnite, you can then turn around and use it in Horizon, which is Meta's Oculus platform, or another platform. And that's one of the big important qualities, which even Zuckerberg has talked about in interviews, is that ability to take digital assets across digital experiences.
So do you see, Father, that so many things that are important to the Catholic Church, like financial inclusion, protection of individual rights, giving people access, do you see all of these things being dramatically enhanced due to the new technology?
I mean, I'll be honest with you, that back-end stuff like that, I'm interested. I've been kind of learning. I've been more interested in the front-end experience. Like, what we want to look at is when your kids or your grandkids are looking to buy a skin, and all they have is secular things, we want to put Catholic things in those spaces. So you could wear an avatar. You could play with an avatar that is St. Dominic or things like that. We talked about getting into the NFT space. So if you want to buy a Catholic NFT, a saint or something like that, that we're in those spaces. That's kind of been a little bit more my focus. Those other things I think are great. That's kind of been a little bit more my focus.
Which seems to me tremendous. Just like as a kid, I traded baseball cards and I saw the statistics of all my favorite players. You could do the same thing for the Saints.
Yes, exactly.
And I don't mean the New Orleans Saints. I mean
exactly.
the Saints.
Exactly.
We'll do it for the New Orleans Saints, too.
Did you ever hear when Pope Francis used a hashtag It was accidentally for the New Orleans Saints.
Oh, that's great. That's great. And did he get contacted by the team?
It was something happened. It was funny. It was all over Twitter, I think.
Was that maybe he gave them a special blessing and they won the Super Bowl that year? We're not sure.
Who knows?
We'll have to check that one out. Though, Father, one of the things we were talking about also earlier in the week, are there elements, though, of new technology and Web3 that don't lend themselves to the church? And maybe if you could talk a little bit about that.
When you think about the question of idolatry, it's the age-old issue of religion. What is essentially idolatry? It's to take something that is created and to make believe that it's the creator. So the first thing is just when we become slaves to our senses. So I think if we treat our experiences in the metaverse and in Web 3.0, virtual reality, as if they were the same thing as reality, I think that's a danger. When we treat them like they're our God, or, and I think we see this with technology addictions, where we're so a slave to the stimulation they provide that we don't know how to be by ourselves in silence. We don't know how to be with other people. We're cut off. And those are the dangers. But I think, my tagline, when people ask me, will technology make things better? I say, I love the line of St. Paul, where sin abounds, grace abounds all the more. We believe in providence. We believe that God is in charge. Yes, there will be bad things that will happen. Sin will abound, but grace will abound all the more. That's kind of my thoughts on that.
Great, thank you, Father. And Matt, I'm wondering your thoughts about community building and the use of video game technology in that, because even certainly something that I saw a lot during COVID is unfortunately so many people were homebound. I mean, we even had to attend Mass remotely over Zoom, and certainly I think a lot of parents were a lot more lenient on how many hours they would allow their kids to play video games when everybody was homebound. But there is kind of a community of the kids while playing the video games as well, where they're actually able to interact and speak to each other while they're in the midst of the game. So I'm just wondering your thoughts on community building and the use of the games.
Well, I think community building is everything throughout history, right? People are social animals, so community is extremely important. And that's also an area generally where Web3, I think, can be better than Web 2, right? So when a lot of communities sort of revolve around obviously faith, but also ownership of things, like there's meetings or gatherings for people who have certain types of cars, or just different things, like people get together with people who are interested in the same things. So that would work digitally too. So digital communities can evolve around the things that people collect digitally, just like they do physically. And I think if that stuff is there and everyone feels like they have ownership in that community, because they literally do, right? The value of their assets is based on how large the community grows and things like that. It makes the communities just a lot more cohesive than some of the online communities we have today, which are really, again, very corporate controlled versus user controlled.
And here's a thing to always remember when we're talking about community online. How many people here know somebody that they've known for years, but they've never met in person? They only know virtually. So Amy, I just met her yesterday for the first time in person. We've been interacting online for like 3, 4, 5 years, and we've been in the same spaces. I can think there's people I've worked with for years that I've done Zoom calls. I feel like I know their families. Alana Berg, he knows one of the people I'm talking about. I've never met him in person. And the beautiful thing is, when I got into Web 2.0 with my blog, I said that they're never going to publish a priest from rural North Carolina. If I'm going to publish on spiritual matters, I've got to create my own audience. And I did that through a blog at first and then video content. But that sense of digital technologies, it really does connect people. Yeah.
Yeah, and then gamification, I think, is extremely helpful for everything. Obviously, games themselves, people like them and they spend so much time on them. It's sort of like, how can we make that time more valuable? That's one of the things I experienced. I spent so much time and money playing video games, and I always thought, like, I earned so much in-game gold and different things, and I was like, oh, if only these were like actual assets or something that was useful, and that's what we're trying to do. You know,
But you did build a career out of it, so.
Yes, that.
Yeah.
We talked about, I mean, there are video games where the currencies actually translate into real world dollars.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we actually talked about, one of the ideas I talked about was setting up a chapel in like one of these games where you could take your virtual character into the chapel and you could tithe your game currency. And we could, you gotta think fundraising. I'm into Austin Priest. You always think about fundraising, right? Like, you know, so, you know, you provide a religious service in the game and then have them tithe their game currency and then cash that out.
I was wondering if my parish was going to be finding a way to do bingo that way during COVID. Because you think about all the traditional fundraisers
Yeah.
that suffered.
Yeah.
Bingo, raffles, so many in-person events. So do you see parishes getting much more creative now, not only to bring people into the community, especially young people, but for fundraising?
I mean, I think we're a long way off from that, but I like the idea of gamification. We were talking about that before with NFTs and things like that. I mean, you could have a lot of fun kind of experiences where you own NFTs or things like that. We were thinking about it at a booth for a conference for Seek for college students, where we'd have it where you'd set up in the booth. We can't completely do this yet, but we think we can do it soon, where they'll put on a habit, or they'll put on, like as an avatar, it'll like make them look like Saint Therese or a priest or something like that. And this technology is, I mean, it's pretty close to be able to do these things.
Which also, frankly, may help some people who are thinking about a religious life picture themselves in that setting.
Exactly.
And maybe lead them to find that calling.
Exactly.
No, that's amazing. So, Darren, I'm wondering some other thoughts about how you see people monetizing their identity and their participation in different things. Because now going forward, there will be this greater realization that, hey, my contribution to this, I actually deserve something from this. So maybe some examples of how you see that happening.
Well, I actually think once the experience is established, it'll be almost intuitive that you own your digital assets online. I think at the moment, it's kind of native to other people because they never had the feeling of ownership. But to get back to crypto gaming, I think one of the neatest things about crypto gaming is that it allows for rapid adoption of a new community into a space that is traditionally sometimes hard to understand. So just by playing a game, you start to earn all of these things. You're like, wow, I actually own them. And so it's just a really seamless way to get into crypto. Right now, when you get into crypto from a financial perspective, you have to create your own wallets. You're very nervous about all of these, how you're going to move your finances around. You have all these addresses. It's a little clunky right now because right now Web3 is growing, and with growing, you have growing pains. And so user experience is a huge thing. And with crypto gaming, it allows people to funnel in with a much more seamless experience. But I mean, that's not the only avenue. Obviously, when you're looking to protect your online identities online, there's a number of different approaches that different teams are taking to make sure that your online identity is secure.
Yeah. I wanted to piggyback on something with that. You know, it's interesting, you talked about the digital things. You know, the joke with NFTs, right, if you're on Twitter, is, hey, I took a screenshot of your NFT, now I own it, ha, 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 right? Like it's a JPEG. And so we kind of wrap our minds around, when we think of digital things, we think, I can just copy it. Like I can just copy and paste, I can take a screenshot, and now I have that digital thing. But that's what blockchain, all this technology does, is it makes these digital assets more secure and more like things. And the more you can wrap your mind around that, once it's in the blockchain and it's NFT, then it has a stabler identity, and you can discern fake ones from the real thing, and that's what the blockchain technology really does. When you start to wrap your mind around that, anything can be turned into an NFT that's a digital asset. Video, music, all that, right?
Yeah, and you also talk about copy and pasting. That's a huge question where people are trying to value why NFTs are important. And in my perspective, I think if somebody copies my JPEG NFT, that there's only one unique version of it, they're just helping me spread awareness that this one is pretty cool. Yeah. You know what I mean? So when you own that specific one, maybe a music artist, an artist that I really like, Carlos Santana, what if he launched a select number of NFTs for his close-knit community? And in that, maybe it's a very special moment. Maybe it's a song that they wrote for them, and maybe it gets distributed later to everybody. But the people who really value that specific NFT that somebody they look up to gave them, it's something that allows creators an opportunity to connect with their communities in a way that never has happened before.
Sure, a great idea. I happened to see him at Bethel Woods this year.
I saw them in Vegas.
Well, good for you.
Can I mention
Sure,
a little bit like about how all this kind of works?
Sure.
Because we talk about all these things, but really the underpinning of all of this is decentralization, right? And I think like Brantley talked earlier during lunch. I think his story was quite crazy, but highlighted the problems with centralization in Web 2. Mm-hmm. He was kicked off Twitter, right? That's just there's somebody who knows what this person thinks or whatever, and they have all the power, all the control of information, of assets, of value, and so that's what blockchain is at its core. It's this decentralized system for tracking all of this, and decentralized means that there is no company or person or anyone that can kick people off or delete things. Everything is there and safe. So some applications of Web3 that exist today are like decentralized versions of Twitter, Reddit, Facebook, those type of things, where all the information that's posted is stored immutably and in a way that anyone can always access. It can never be deleted. It can never be taken down. That's also how ownership works, right? Mm-hmm. If there's some company that says you own something, that's not you really owning it. It's sort of like renting it, right? But when it's part of a decentralized network where you are the only one that controls that thing, that's how actual ownership of digital assets works. So that's the decentralized nature of blockchain platforms is really what allows all of this that we've been talking about to happen.
And it was the perfect illustration, because while there was a knee-jerk reaction on the one hand to remove him, when a decentralized community was able to vote, he ultimately received support. So it really does illustrate exactly that point, sure.
And one thing I want to add with digital assets, so people had questions about the VR experiences we were doing, and because they're kind of like, how did, as a priest afford to be able to do this high-end experience with these models? And the reality is, with these digital things, we bought a lot of assets. So there's a lot of marketplaces for gaming industry and stuff like that. I've met a family out in San Diego. They're a homeschool family, devout Catholic. The oldest brother went to college for gaming industry, taught his younger siblings, and they take and they use assets that they find online, and they create their own video games and their own animations. See, that's the thing is, like, I think in a few years, some of the stuff, we joke around about this, we think some of the things we're doing now, kids will be doing with like their phones and with some technology, that they'll be creating animations, virtual experiences, taking existing assets, maybe combining it and making them a little bit their own. And the way I think of it is, think of photography with Instagram. So with Instagram, 100 years ago, only professionals could do it in a dark room. And then when it became digital, even then it wasn't really accessible to kids. Then Instagram comes out and bam, every kid can do almost a professional level of photography with the new phones. I think that's where some of this Web 3.0 technology is coming.
It'll be a great tool for kids to teach each other and participate, because it'll feel interactive.
Exactly.
So in the time we have left, it would be great to get some questions from the audience. Sure. Thank you.
So one thing you brought up that I think is really important for Catholics that isn't discussed enough is this deep fake issue. And so deep fakes combined with photorealistic video games that are coming out now have basically enabled we live in a post-truth world at this point. We can't trust really any media. I mean, this is already seen with people using video games to make propaganda or So one of the most disturbing examples of this to me is that a few years ago, the Vatican released a photo of a letter that Pope Benedict wrote. And the Vatican modified that letter to make it look like it was saying something it wasn't. And so to me, this really degrades the church's plausibility as being a witness to things that have happened. I mean, the church's mission is to be a witness to an event that happened 2,000 years ago. And so if I can't trust a photo they released last week, why should we trust them about anything else? And so we look at these tools like the NFT and the verification that blockchain offers. How do you see those kinds of tools being used to protect truth when that should be one of the main things the church is concerned with?
Yeah. So one current event that's going on right now is Elon taking over Twitter. I'm sure you guys all heard, right? When in the cryptocurrency space, there was a major exchange that went down, FTX, and everyone was scrambling to find news. Everyone was trying to figure out what was legit, what happened. But one of the neatest things that came out of that whole debacle was that the actual community on Twitter, they would go back to the blockchain to kind of assess what was actually the truth based off of what was being said. They tracked the money. Everything was very transparent. And it was almost as if it was citizen journalism coming into play for the very first time, where they were just figuring out what actually happened by the traceability. So that's more of a financial perspective. But when it comes down to communications, there's also teams that are trying to build that trust layer as well, so that you link your real identity to what you said. Nobody can say otherwise.
Father, can you add?
Yeah, and I think that's exactly why the Lord has provided us with this blockchain technology. I mean, it's like we have a problem that comes up and there's an immediate solution. You know, the problem is that with digital technology, you will be able to do deep fakes, you'll be able to modify things, but the blockchain technology prevents that, like you said. You know, you go back through, it's like a ledger, you can't change it, and it allows for that authentication. I think that's good news. I think that's why we need to invest in this technology as well.
In that specific case, for example, when that original document was created, if at the time it could have been put on a blockchain, actually stored there, it would be time-stamped and with a digital signature from the people that published it, right? So then any time in the future anyone publishes the similar document, anyone could verify. You know, obviously that technology didn't exist at that time, but going forward, that's a really great use case of blockchain that is only starting to be explored.
Anyone else?
Nice.
So right now we live in this weird situation where we've got two living popes. So you know, we have a Pope Emeritus and we have a regular Pope. And so there's been a number of very controversial things that have happened over the last decade. And so some people bring up the question, is this Pope an actual Pope? Did this Pope resign correctly? People ask these questions. And so could we have an NFT of Peter's ring? So Peter's ring was, the whole point of that is to say, Papal Bull, let's authenticate that the Pope actually sent out this letter, right? I mean, that's the idea behind it. So could we have an NFT of Peter's ring that passes on? So the church has to exist for thousands of years. So we want to keep records that far back. So is that doable?
I mean, I think my impression, and I might be wrong on this, from this conference, I've been convinced that all this blockchain technology will just be standard technology in 10, 20 years. That it's just all records will be kept using blockchains. This technology will be widely dispersed, and it'll prevent. I mean, I'm sure there's going to be new problems that'll arise, but I think the problem of deep fakes and some of this stuff and authenticating information, that's kind of my prediction. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong on that.
Well, and the reason is, again, back to decentralization. So if you want a place to store these records, if someone or some group or some government controls that place, they can alter the records. So that's really why blockchain adds something new that was not possible before. It's not possible for anyone to ever alter those records.
Yeah. And isn't that a problem with Twitter? I mean, people post those old tweets and you don't know if they're real or not.
Absolutely.
You know, it's like, it's confusing because you're like, did the person really say it? Is it a parody account? Is it a joke? Is it serious? Is it disinformation?
Yeah.
Gentlemen, we're at time, but any final thoughts before we wrap up? Darren, I'll start with you.
No, I hope out of this conference you guys just got a lot of hope and enthusiasm for a space that's growing. Innovation is sometimes hard because it takes the leaders to kind of push the space forward, and then it requires people to realize what the value behind what the innovation is entailing to help support those leaders to be able to contribute to the industry growing. And so I really appreciate all of you guys here today. I do.
Matt?
Yeah, I guess, my message is it's all about ownership. And I think one of the things that people don't realize is how much they don't own anymore that they used to. And that's what this is here to solve. And I just say for those who had questions that we didn't get time to answer, I think all of us are around and love to talk about this stuff. So.
Great. And how about you, Father?
Yeah, I think, the big thing I want to put all of this in the context of is providence. Everything happens by God's active and permissive will. So either God does it directly or he allows it for the greater good. As Catholics, we live with a confidence and a hope that Jesus is the Lord of history, that nothing happens outside of God's providence. And I love, there's a great book that I think everybody should read, Abandonment to Divine Providence by Cusade. And we have to abandon ourselves that God is allowing this technology. And my big thing, like I said during COVID lockdown, I said it constantly to everybody, I mean, we have to adapt and flourish. Like, we can't stay stuck at a particular time period, whether it's the 12th century or the 1950s, or pick your time, whatever you think was the ideal time. Sorry, time keeps moving on. And we have to abandon ourselves to divine providence.
Thank you. Well, the best words I can think of to end: adapt and flourish. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for attending. We appreciate it.